Hey everybody, welcome back. This is today's assignment, the assignment for September 28th, which is a Tuesday. This is what we talked about in class today, and this is a kind of a new method here, AC grouping. Now we've actually already seen a method called grouping that we use for four-term polynomials or quadrinomials. In this assignment, we are doing trinomials, and we've also done trinomials before. So what we're doing here is we're kind of mashing up the grouping method with the X method for trinomials. And the reason why we have to do that, why we need a new method, is we have these quadratic trinomials, right? 3 terms and degree 2. And before, what we've seen is a quadratic trinomial, but if there was a number here in front of the squared term, we could factor out the 10. But in this case, we can't do that because this doesn't have a factor of 10 and this doesn't have a factor of 10 either. So we're kind of stuck in terms of factoring until we figure out what to do with these numbers. So what I wanted to make sure that you know is not just how to use this method, but when to use the method. And this is the method for when we have a quadratic trinomial. In other words, 3 terms, trinomial. Quadratic is degree 2. And there's a number in front of the squared piece that we can't factor out. Okay, that's when we use it. If we don't have that number there, there's a different method. Okay, so this is called the AC grouping method. Let's go back one step and talk about standard form really quick, because that's important for this lesson. The standard form for a quadratic trinomial looks like this. We have ax squared, we have bx, and we have c. And the a, b, and c are just placeholders for whatever numbers we have. And also, it doesn't have to be an x because we see that some of these aren't x's or whatever, like n's or whatever. But the x stands for whatever variable we're using, and the a, b, and c are just placeholders for these numbers. Okay. So the reason this is called the AC grouping method is because we use this number and this number, in this case the 10 and the 12, to help us with this grouping. So what we do is we take this, the a and the c, and we multiply them together. The first thing I'm going to do before I even do anything else is I'm just going to list the a, the b, and the c. Okay, just because those are pieces that I'm going to use. So I'm talking about the coefficient or the number in front of the squared term, the quadratic term, the coefficient of the linear term, or the number in front of the variable that doesn't have a 2, and then the constant term. Those are the 3 things that I need. Then I take a and I multiply it by c. In this case, that's 10 times 12, which is 120, and that's an important number. Okay, so that's kind of new stuff. Now from there, we actually go back and we kind of do a method or part of a method that is similar. Okay, we take that new number, 120, and we put it at the top of the cross, and then we put the 12 at the bottom. Sorry, not the 12. We put the 23 at the bottom, excuse me. So normally when we use the X method like this, we say, okay, the 12 goes here and the 23 goes here. But in this case, we don't put just the 12. We put 10 times 12 up there. Okay, that's, again, where the AC comes in. So this number right here is A times C, and this number is B. So the 10 times the 12 goes here, 23 goes here. All right, now the way that we use this cross is actually the same as how we would normally do factoring with the cross method. We're looking for 2 numbers, and when we multiply them together, we want to get 120, and when we add them together, we want to get 23. Okay, so we're looking for factors of 120 that add or combine to a 23. So what I'm going to do here, this is helpful for me to do, is I just list all the factor pairs of 120 until I find the 2 that work. Okay, so I just start from the beginning. I know that 1 goes into 120. That's 1 times 120. And I know that 2 goes into 120. That's 2 times 60. And if you didn't know that, you can just start dividing, just kind of systematically or in order. So 120 divided by 1, okay? 120 divided by 2. Okay, so 2 times 60 is 120. 120 divided by 3, so that's 40. So 3 times 40. Now remember what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the numbers that multiply to 120, which these all do, but they also have to add 23. So let's keep going. What about 4? So 120 divided by 4 is 30, so 4 times 30. Okay, still not there, got to keep on going. What about 5? 120 divided by 5. So that's 5 times 24. Okay, I'm getting closer. These add to 121, these add to 62, these add to 43, these add to 34, these add to 29. So notice that I'm getting closer and closer and closer to that number that I want. Okay, what about 6? 120 divided by 6. Okay, so that's 20 times 6. But if I add them together, I don't get 23, but I'm getting closer. Okay, let's do 120 divided by 7. Doesn't work, gives me a fraction or a decimal. Okay, let's do 120 divided by 8. Okay, I got an 8 times a 15. Now if you think about it, those two numbers also add to 23. So the magic numbers here are 8 and 15. They will multiply to 120 and they will add to 23. So that part, just that piece right here, where we use the cross to find those two magic numbers, that is something familiar. But what we do with those numbers is actually a little bit different. Okay, so let me switch here into pencil mode so that we can kind of separate some of this stuff and you can see what we do. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this trinomial and we're going to make it into a quadrinomial. We're actually going to break up this middle term into two other pieces. Okay, so remember that these two numbers added to 23, which means I can take 23 and I can kind of like uncombine like terms. I can make this an 8n plus a 15n. Make sure there's a plus in there. All right, so 23 turns into those two. So these two magic numbers that I got are the numbers that we use to break down the middle term. Okay, now I still have the 10n squared from the beginning, and I still have the 12 from the end. And now I have 4 terms, or a quadrinomial, and the reason why this is important is because now I can do grouping. Okay, so the reason why this is called AC grouping is because I use the AC to get that magic number 120, and then I use those two numbers to turn it into a quadrinomial that I can factor by grouping. So they don't all have a common factor because like this one doesn't have an n, and like these two goes into them, but 2 doesn't go into this one. But now we're going to factor it by grouping. So what do these have in common? Well, they both have an n, and also 2 goes into both of those. So I'm going to factor out or undistribute a 2n. So I'm going to take a 2n out of the first one, I'm going to take 2n out of the second one, and when I do that, I'm left with a 5n plus 4. Double check. 2 times 5 is 10, n times n is n squared. 2 times 4 is 8, and then I had an n on there, so 8n. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing for these two terms. Okay, in this case, the greatest common factor looks like it's going to be a 3. So when I take out a 3, what's left is a 5n and a 4. Okay, double check. 3 times 5 is 15, and I got an n in there. 3 times 4 is 12. Okay. Now I have these two common binomials, so I can factor that out. So I'm going to take out the 5n plus 4, I'm going to undistribute that. And what's left over after I take those out, I'm going to try to cover them up so you can see, is that 2n in front of my finger and the 3 that's in between my other two fingers. Okay, so what's left is the 2n and the 3. And there we go. We have factored that trinomial. Okay, so that is called the AC grouping method. It uses two methods that we already know. We already know this X method, done that before for trinomials. Okay, the difference is the trinomials that we did didn't have a number in front here. Okay, so this is kind of a modified X method with the grouping method as well. And when we slam those two things together, we get the AC grouping method. There's quite a few steps there, so let's go back and let's do another one for practice, okay? And then maybe if you feel comfortable, you can kind of move on and try some on your own. So let's go down to another even one. Let's do number 6. Okay. Notice it's a trinomial, right? 3 terms. It's a quadratic, degree 2, and we can't factor out a 4. Okay. Again, you need to know not just how to do this method, but when to do the method. And this method works for quadratic trinomials like this, where there's a number in front that you can't factor out. Okay, so let's start by listing our coefficients here, our a and our b and our c. This is the a, this is the b, this is the c. Take any signs that are in front along for the ride as well. So we want a negative 35, not just a 35. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to multiply a times c, or in this case 4 times negative 35. And I think that gives us 140 or negative 140. I'm going to double check that really quick. Okay, yep, negative 140. Whoops. Okay, now that becomes what we call the grouping number. And so we take our little x and we put the negative 140 at the top. Geez, I did that twice in a row. Negative 140. Okay, and at the bottom of that we put b, 13. Okay, so we want factors of 140 that add to 13 or combine to be a 13 somehow. We'll talk about that in a minute. Actually, one of them is going to be negative and one of them is going to be positive. So we're actually looking for something with a difference of 13. But we're going to look for those magic 2 numbers here. So this number is a times c, and this number is b. So a times c goes up here, b goes here. All right, so again, I think it's helpful to, when you have a big number like 140, for me, like there's so many factors there that I'm just going to list them out until I find the one that I'm after. And in this case, I'm looking for ones where I can get a 13 out of them, and I know it's actually going to be by like subtraction because one's positive, one's negative. So let's kind of keep in mind that one of these numbers will be positive and one of these numbers will be negative. That's the only way I can multiply to a negative number. So let's list the factors. 1 times 140. All right, 2 times 70. 3 times, let's see, oh, 3 doesn't go in, actually. And if you didn't know that, then we can just check. All right, it comes out as a fraction or a decimal. Okay, so that's not what we want. Let's see, 4. 4 goes in, we know that's 35. Now remember, we're looking for 2 numbers where we can combine them somehow to get a 13. Or in this case, like the difference is going to be 13. So let's keep on going. 140 divided by 5 is 28, so I got a 5 and a 28. Okay, now if I find the difference of those, that's going to give me a 23, so I'm getting closer. Okay, what about 6? 140 divided by 6. Nope. What about 7? 140 divided by 7. Okay, so 7 and 20. And then you might have noticed that those are the 2 magic numbers, right? A negative 7 and a positive 20 will give me a positive 13, which is what I'm after, and they will multiply to give me the negative 140. Okay, so that's kind of what those are the 2 numbers that we need. Okay, so let's go back and unpack what we did. We found the ABC. We multiply a times c. We put it at the top. We put b in the bottom. And we fill in the cross. Remember, the factors that multiply to this guy and add to this guy are the ones that we want, which is, in this case, negative 7 and 20. Okay, I'm just going to give myself a little bit of extra room here. Okay, now the next part is the grouping part. So we take our trinomial, and we want to turn it into a quadrinomial, a 4-term polynomial. It actually doesn't matter which order we put these in. I'm going to put the plus 20r and then the minus 7r. I think that'll be easier. It doesn't really make a difference in the long run. You're going to get the same answer either way. But now I have this quadrinomial. I basically took this like term and I undivided it. Or excuse me, I uncombined like terms. If I took these like terms and combine them, I get 13. We're just kind of going the other direction. Okay, so now it's a quadrinomial, and now I factor by grouping, because the first two terms have something in common. In this case, it's a 4 and an r. And when I factor out that 4r, divide out that 4r from the first term, I have an r left over. And when I divide a 4r from this term, I have a 5 left over. For these two terms, the last two, the second two, I'm going to take out a negative 7, because 7 goes into both of those, and if that guy's negative, we should take out a negative as well. And if I take negative 7r and divide it by negative 7, I get r. If I take negative 35 and divide it by negative 7, I get 5, which is actually exactly what I wanted, because now these binomials match. Okay. And now I can undistribute the r plus 5. So the common factor for this term right here and this term right here is r plus 5. It's a binomial. So when I undistribute that binomial, what's left is the 4r and the negative 7. There we go. Okay, now this part you've done before. We did this last week. This is called the grouping method. We did grouping method for quadrinomials. That was the very first day of factoring. Okay, over here, this is like kind of like the x method, or like a modified x method. So if you can put those two things together, then we have the AC grouping method, which is what we want. So we got to know how to do the cross method, which we've talked about. We got to know how to do grouping, which we've talked about. Now we're putting them together. Okay. Let's do another one here. Let's do number 12. Okay. So start out with the A and the B and the C. Now, if you are still having a hard time with this, what I would recommend is that you go back and look at the problems that we just did, and then try to reproduce those steps on this problem. Try to do this one on your own. See if you can use number 2 and number 6 as examples to help you get through number 12. And if you can do that on your own, or the more you can do on your own, the more independent you're getting, the better you're going to be learning. If you don't try on your own and don't push yourself, then you're probably just going to be dependent on the video and dependent on me the whole time, and we don't want that. We want you to become independent. So this is where I would start. Okay, see if you can remember what to do with those numbers. Factor this guy out. When you're done, you can come back and you can look at the video to see if you got it right. But go ahead and pause the video and try number 12 on your own. Okay, so the next step here is to multiply A times C. In this case, that's 3 times 40, which is going to give you a 120. And then we're going to put that 120 at the top of the cross here. At the bottom of the cross, we're going to put the B term. So A times C goes up top, B goes at the bottom. And we're looking for the magic numbers that will multiply to 120 and combine to give you a negative 29. Now, because this is a positive number right here, we want both of these to be, these have to match, these signs have to match. They either are both positive or they're both negative. But since they have to combine to a negative 29, we know that these are going to be both negative numbers. So let's do our little listy thing. I'm going to go here and do 120. And we're going to see the ones that kind of that add or combine to give me a 29. So I got a 1 and a 120, right? I got a 2 and a 60. I got a 3 and a 40. I got a 4 and a 50. So far, I'm not seeing any that combine to give me a 29 in any way. I got a 5 and a 40. I got a, let's see, does 6 go in? Yeah, I got a 6 and a 20. Okay, I'm still not seeing a 29 yet. So maybe we should keep going. I'm just double checking, making sure. Okay, so let's do 120 divided by 7 would be the next one. I don't think that works. Okay, yeah, it's a fraction. Okay, 120 divided by 8. Okay, so it's 8 and 15. Those don't give me a 29. What about 120 divided by 9? Nope. Okay, 120 divided by 10. So that's 10 and 12. And we're looking for two that combine to give me a 29. Did I miss some? Let's take a look. 1, nope. 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 Oh, I think it's this one actually. 4 times 30, right? Okay. I think I was doing a different number here. Sorry, let me go back. Ooh. All right, try that again. 120 divided by 5 is 24. Okay, there it is. There it is. 120 divided by 6. Okay, that's 20. Okay, sorry about that. I was just got my multiplication wrong. Should have been using my calculator. Okay, so those are the two magic numbers that are going to give me a 29. But keeping in mind they both have to be negative. We're going to have a negative 5 and a negative 24. Okay, cool. Combine those, we're going to get that. Woo! Okay, we did it. We got through the X method. Okay, now from there, we're going to factor by grouping. So we need to make this trinomial into a quadrinomial. All right, cool. So we got that guy. Now we're going to split the middle term into, now actually it doesn't matter how we do this here. Let's do a negative 5r and then a negative 24r and then a plus 40. Okay. Now we could have actually put those in a different order if we wanted to. It's totally fine. It will give us the same answer either way. So if you have those reversed in your problem, it will probably work out. Let's just make sure that we have the same factors when we're done. Okay, so these have a common factor. Now the 3 and the 5 don't, but there's an r in both of these. So I'm going to take out an r, and that will leave me with an r, 3r minus 5 from the first term. Now these guys right here, they have a common factor. It looks like 4, nope, 8 is actually the bigger one. So we want to take out a negative 8 here. And that will leave me with a 3r. Ooh, I'm running out of room here. Let's get in close on this guy. Try to write this smaller. I'm taking out a negative 8. That's going to give me a 3r minus 5 left. Sorry, kind of small. Now this is the common binomial, and so I can take that out. 3r minus 5. I'm going to undistribute that. And what's left is this r and this minus 8. Okay. Now if you do it in a different, if you reorder these terms like in a different way, you actually still get those two same factors. You just end up with them in the different order. And so if your final answer looked like this, that is totally fine. That's the same, basically the same answer. And the reason why is because multiplication is what we call commutative, which means the order doesn't matter. So if I'm multiplying this piece and this piece together, I can swap those pieces and it's still going to give me the same answer. Okay, so sorry for the little delay on that one. I don't know what happened there in my mind. I was doing something with like 200 or something, I think. The negative 200, I think I was using the negative 200 that we had on an in-class problem today. But yeah, these are the two numbers we're looking for. So once again, the X method we kind of know how to do, as long as you get the right factors there, which I didn't this time, but fixed it. And then we have a grouping method. And the step in between those that connects them is the going from the trinomial to the quadrinomial using these two magic numbers. Once we have a quadrinomial, it's just a grouping problem. Okay? All right. We kind of blew it on that one, or I kind of blew it on that one. So I'm going to do one more with you, just for good measure. And now again, hopefully at this point you kind of have a good idea on the method here. You have several good examples, so try to follow the pattern there. Try to go back and see if you can remember or if you can look back at 2 or 6 or 12 or your notes from class today and try to do this on your own. That's going to be the best way to learn. Don't just use the video as a kind of a crutch to help you get through. Try to learn as you go. All right, we're going to do 8, so pause the video and try to do 8 if you haven't already, and then when you're done, unpause and come on back and we'll talk about how it works. Okay, so you should be coming back from pause now, and you should have already tried number 8. Let's see how you did. Okay, first step here is to list my A, my B, and my C. In this case, that's a 3, a negative 32, and a 45. Okay, that's step 1. Step 2 is to multiply A times C. In this case, that's 3 times 45, which is, I believe, 135. I'm going to double check that because now my multiplication confidence is all shot. Okay. Okay, 135 is going to go up the top, and then I'm going to have a negative 32 at the bottom. All right, so what I'm looking for is 2 numbers that multiply to this number, and they combine to give me this number. Now, since this one's positive and this one's negative, these both have to be negative numbers. The only way I can multiply and get a positive and at the same time combine and get a negative number is if these are both negative numbers. All right, so I'm going to make my little list. So 1 times 135 I don't think is what I'm looking for. 2 doesn't work. I think 3 works. Yep, it's 3 and 45. Obviously, we knew that from before. Okay, let's try, I don't think 4 works because it's not even. Let's try 5 though. Okay, so that's 5 times 27, and I think this is the magic pair because when I add those together I get 32. Now of course we want a negative 5 and a negative 27 because we want to combine them to a negative 32, and multiplying those two guys will give me the positive 135 that I am after. Okay, so step 1, list out the A, B, and C. Step 2, get your AC, set up your cross. Step 3 is find the 2 magic numbers that are going to multiply to this and combine to this. Okay, so we've kind of done that before, the cross method at least. All right, now it goes to a grouping problem. So we want to take this trinomial and we want to turn it into a quadrinomial so that we can try grouping on it. And you know, if we do it right, these will all work out with the grouping. We actually are forcing them to work out with this process right here. So let's do a 3x squared. And this time I think it kind of makes sense to put a negative 27x here just because the 3 and the 27 have a common factor. It doesn't actually matter if you put the negative 5 here. You just factor out an x instead of a 3x, and that's okay. But sometimes it looks a little bit nicer if you put them in a certain order. So again, the order that we wrote this in, they don't really matter for your final answer, but sometimes it can just make the problem work out a little bit nicer for the middle steps. All right, so now these guys have a common factor, and these two guys have a common factor. So for the first two, it's 3x. When you undistribute or divide out the 3x from the first term, you're left with an x. When you undistribute or divide out a 3x from the second term, you end up with a negative 9. And when we do the second term, we're expecting to get that same binomial. So we got a 5 that goes into both of these. The common factor is 5. Since that third term's negative, let's take out a negative 5 so that our binomials match. When you take a negative 5x and undistribute or factor out a negative 5, the x is left over. And when you take a 45 and divide out or undistribute or factor out a negative 5, you're going to have a negative 9. Okay, so now notice now matching binomials, okay, which is what we want. So let's undistribute that matching binomial. That's going to come out to the front now. And what's left is the 3x and the minus 5. Okay, now again, had we ordered these in a different order, we would have had the same two factors in our answer. It's just that this one would have been first and this one would have been second, which is actually fine. So as you're checking your answer key, if you got 3x minus 5 times x minus 9, that's also correct. All right, so that's 4 good examples for you, in addition to the 2 that we did in class today. You got the answers to the odds, and so you should be good to go. There's actually not a whole lot of different stuff on this worksheet. We're just focusing on one method and one method only, because the method itself is a little bit complex. There's a few different steps there. Okay, so practice, practice, practice. We'll do some more speed factoring maybe later this week, but these are techniques and skills that we need to have to kind of solve bigger problems or to do more complex problems in SM3 and 1050. Thanks for watching, guys.